second reading today comes from 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 11 through 15. We're picking up through the lectionary reading the story of King David. This is the first part of a multiple part sermon series on David and his life. Listen for the word of the Lord. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with him, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. It happened late one afternoon when David rose from his couch and was walking about on the roof of the king's house that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. David sent someone to inquire about the woman. It was reported, "This is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite." So David sent messengers to fetch her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she was purifying herself after her period. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived, and she sent and told David, "I am pregnant." So David sent word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab and the people fared and how the war was going. David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house, wash your feet." Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the entrance of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. When they told David Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, "You have just come from a journey. Why did you not go down to your house?" Uriah said to David, "The ark of Israel? The ark and Israel and Judah remain in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in open fields. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do such a thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day. And on the next, David invited him to eat and drink in his presence, and he made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his lord, but he did not go down to his house. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, so that he may be struck down and die." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, we're all pretty familiar with this story. We have heard this one many times over the years, and we know how it's usually interpreted. It goes something like this: "Yes, David lusted. Shame on you, David, bad David, he wanted sex." The moral of the story is, if you just don't lust after some Bathsheba, you are okay. So we're off the hook, right? But I'd like to suggest maybe we need to look at this story from a different perspective. You see, the linchpin sin in this story is about lying. We live in a time now where we are having a crisis of truth. We do not talk directly about lying, but we live in a time when we need to. When we're not used to thinking about truth and lies, people can get away with making up their own rules about reality, and they rationalize lying and they ignore the damage that it does. So let's take again a look at David. As King David is a moral case study, I like to refer to David as the lying king. We live together in our lives with other people. We live as communities, right? We divide up responsibilities, and different people get different roles, and each one of us has a role to follow out. It's sort of like a play that we put on. We depend upon each other to play our roles. We trust one another to play our roles. Like a ballet dancer, one leaps, but they depend upon the other dancer to catch them. We all trust each other to live out those roles. And from the king on down, everybody depends on each other. But if we cannot trust each other to honestly play their part, then we fall. Not only the one dancer falls, but society falls apart. We all fall apart. We all have responsibilities to play our roles, even the king, especially the king. And King David had a number of roles that he played in society that people depended on him for. He was king. He was a public figure. He was a husband. He was the head of a household. He was the head de facto of a business. The king holds society together and holds all these groups of people together. In each of these roles, he is a role model. You're supposed to embody the best. It's your role as king. You are a moral leader. The same could be said for the head of a corporation, for the head of a household, a woman or a man. Same as could be said as a big brother or a big sister. You have a role to play, and people depend on you. When you play your role, you have to assume that other people are depending upon you, and other people are watching how you live your role. They get their clues of how they are going to act in their roles from watching you. When you are in a role, like it or not, you have power. You're given power. It's your role, your status, and it comes with certain duties. Like Uncle Ben says to Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. David was in all these roles, and he did not take responsibility. He did not do his duty. The Bible starts out in this story with the words, "In the springtime, when kings go out to battle." In other words, David obviously should have been out on the battlefield, but where was David? Sunbathing on the roof. He did not fulfill his role. More than that, he corrupted his role. David had a responsibility. You know that saying, the tone comes from the top? Well, the tone in David's household and in his country was out of tune. The servants were watching. The servants who went to fetch Bathsheba, they were watching. They knew something was up, and they begin to think, well, if the king can get away with this sneaking around, then why should we follow the moral rules? David had the role as a moral leader in his household. As the 10 Commandments say, thou shalt not steal. He stole Bathsheba from his neighbor. As the 10 Commandments say, thou shalt not covet. It corrupts one's character. David corrupted by coveting, and it corrupted not just himself, but his society, his household, his country. David had another role as head of the military. Now, when you're the head of an organization, people's lives are in your hands. No place more than in a military, but in all sorts of places. People's lives are in our hands. Our choices affect what happens to other people. We make choices with respect for their lives. People are an end in themselves. They are good in themselves, created in the image of God, we say. It means that they in themselves are a good, and they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. What people are not is a means to our ends. If you treat them as a means to your ends, then they have been reduced to becoming a tool in your hands, an object that you use. You can see it when David has Uriah killed to save face over David's causing the pregnancy of Uriah's wife. David used Uriah as a means for his own ends. He used his general as a means for his own end. He lied and deceived to do it. As the Ten Commandments say, you are not supposed to lie. David had a duty to tell the truth, and he did not. But the story does not stop there. There was a 4-star general, General Joab, who knew that what he was doing was wrong. To set up another one of your military leaders to get killed, that's a form of lying that is profoundly corrupting. Now, I invite you sometime in the next week or two to read the rest of the story of David's life. You end up finding out just how far this lying and corruption spread in his family, in his country, in the people of God. It's like in the book of Exodus, Pharaoh lost his firstborn. You're going to find out when you read that David loses his firstborn. It's heartbreaking, heartbreaking. And it's a call for us to examine ourselves. Later on in the story, David's other son, Absalom, turns against him. The family has become corrupt. And then General Joab, who had killed Uriah, ends up killing David's other son, Absalom. Joab thought he could get away with it. The system, he thought, was corrupt, and he became part of the corruption. It starts with the lies that you see in this story today. I've been rereading a great book that I've had for quite a number of years, Cicely Bach's book, Lying, Moral Choices in Public and Private Life, and I think it's just as profound as when she wrote it. What is lying? Well, we may make mistakes, and that's not a lie. And you may see a mirage off in the distance and say, there's water there. But that's not a lie, that's a mistake. There's a crucial distinction about lying, because lying has to do with being intentionally deceitful or treacherous. Lying happens when you intend your statement to mislead people. It may be something that you say directly, maybe you withhold information, maybe it's the way that you give a look, but a lie is a lie, and thou shalt not lie, the Bible says. Why do people lie? Sometimes they lie out of embarrassment. They want to save face, okay? And so they'll tell a lie. They may call it a white lie. Sometimes they say, well, I didn't want to hurt their feelings, so they hold back some part of the truth that they don't want to tell. And sometimes we just plain want to save ourselves from some hassle. It's easier to not tell the truth. But other times it's very clear that when people are lying, what they're seeking to do is to manipulate other people and to gain power. The thing is, people who created in the image of God are created that way to make free choices based on their estimate of what is real. These estimates rely on information from other people. Lies distort the information that we get from other people. Lies distort our reading of reality, our perception of what's real. And thus, lies distort our freedom to choose. To the extent that knowledge gives power, lies affect the distribution of power. They give power to the liar, and they take power away from the person who's being duped. Lies eliminate or obscure relevant alternatives, and they take away freedom of choice. Lies deny the possibility required for a reasonable choice, and thus they deny human freedom. They injure the deceived person by leading that person astray. Now, these lies may be coercive, but they give power to the deceiver and take it away from the deceived. And the liars end up being free riders. They want the benefit without telling the truth, without the risks that come with being a truth teller. And they think that they alone should have this status. that everyone else should tell the truth, but they don't really have to. Liars want the benefits. They're free riders. What do lies do? They foster the false belief that there are more alternatives than is really the case. Lies cloud the sense of clarity when we seek to make choices. When we want to make the choice that's the best alternative, lies obscure the costs and benefits of various choices. In Vietnam, the lies were told on up the chain to say how well the war was going when it wasn't going well, and look at the lives that were lost. Lies deceive in regard to how certain choices are made, and thus lies cause suffering. Lies cause suffering. Cicely Bach makes an analogy. She says to lie, you have to think about assault. And this is, I was just blown away to think about it in these terms. Think about lying like assault. In assault, you force someone to do your will. You coerce them to do what you want them to do and how you want them to act. She says, in many ways, lying is like assault because you're coercing someone against their will. By lying, you tell them false information, you hide information, you make people do what they otherwise would not freely do. Lying is like assault, it's just more subtle. Lying works at the level of beliefs. If you can get people to believe a false reality, you can manipulate them into doing things that go against their best interest. Take a look at Shakespeare's play Othello as a case study in lying. Othello's physically strong, but through a series of lies, he ends up destroying himself through himself. Lying is the assault of being lied to. It's being deceived, it's being used, it's being coerced into doing things against your will. And it ends up leaving those who are lied to feeling used and tossed away. It makes them feel disappointed, makes them feel suspicious about life. They feel resentful, wronged, violated, afraid of the future. After all, what can they trust? What is real anymore? St. Augustine said it a long time ago, when regard for the truth has been broken down or even slightly weakened, all things remain doubtful, end quote. I want to say something more about this because lies impact society. It doesn't just impact individuals. It impacts us as a society because we are social creatures. We depend upon each other to play our roles, to do our part, and part of that duty that we have is to tell the truth so that there's a trustworthy sense of reality broadly in society. But when enough lies are told, the whole sense of reality in society ends up being blurred. Liars overlook the harm they perpetuate. They want to talk about it as if it's just harm to others. But really, there's two other things you have to think about in relationship to lies. First of all, think about, because people say, well, I told a little lie, but it didn't really do anything to anybody. Are you sure? Because the lie harms the liar. It takes away their integrity. The philosopher Montaigne said, truth has one face, the reverse of truth has 100,000 faces. Who are you? What face are you really looking at in the mirror? A liar, when they lie, if no one else knows, they know, and it harms their integrity. They begin to lose respect for other people. They begin to lose respect for themselves. Lies are kind of like those potato chips, I bet you can't eat just one. With lies, bet you can't tell just one. One lie needs shoring up by other lies. And telling all these lies takes a lot of energy to even remember what truth is. And after the first few lies, other lies come more easily. Psychologists have studied this. After you tell some lies, other lies become more easily. Psychological barriers wear down. More lies seem necessary, and they seem less reprehensible. The ability to make moral distinctions can coarsen, and your sense of perception seems to get twisted and warped. The more lies you're likely to tell, the more possibilities you have of being caught, which makes you more likely to lie. Integrity is violated. You know, the word integrity in part means that you're not touched, you're not struck, you're not hit. But in lying, you hit yourself. You harm yourself. It hurts your sense of integrity, your sense of wholeness. It skews your judgment. Now, lying at its heart is an attempt to gain power. But when your word can no longer be trusted, you end up with less power. Lying leads to people being overconfident of their own invulnerability. But personal entanglements and worries and loss of integrity are likely to come. The second thing I wanted to just highlight in particular is liars overlook the harm they perpetuate on society. That lies don't just happen to, the impact doesn't just happen to individuals, it happens to social groups. You can see it as David the king. He colludes with the servants, the household servants, and they know, and it begins to affect them. He colludes with his military advisor, and the lying starts to spread. It corrupts society, it corrupts the culture. Imagine a world where no obligation to the truth is an assumption. Imagine when everybody ends up lying and you can't trust anyone anymore. The corruption spreads. Lying damages human communities. The veneer of trust that we have with the world is sometimes pretty thin. As a lie spreads through imitation or retaliation, whatever, that thin sense of trust is damaged. But trust is a social good we have to protect. Like the air we breathe, like the water we drink, we rely on trust each and every day. When trust is damaged, a community is in danger of collapse. When trust is damaged, a culture, a country is in danger of collapse. It is one of those things that we need to think about and look at, because the impact of lying is not just on individuals, but on societies. And over time, it becomes cumulative, and it is hard to reverse. If enough people justify lying, pretty soon everyone feels like they have to lie. And a society whose members who are unable to distinguish truthful messages from deceptive ones will collapse. But even before a general collapse, individual choice and survival is imperiled. You couldn't tell if a well was poisoned or not. We depend upon the trust that we have for other people. Leaders have a heightened responsibility, as King David did. They have a heightened responsibility in their role to be not just responsible for themselves, but for the people who are watching them. They're responsible for those who listen to them, follow them, or who are influenced by them, the shareholder and the stakeholder. They have to trust what is being said. There are waves of repercussions, not just on decisions, but on the trajectories of those decisions. Responsibility means that leaders need to become aware of just how important it is that we tell the truth clearly. Because the only cure to the lie is having a radical sense of holding to the truth in all times and places. And being truthful is hard work. Being truthful is hard work. It may make you uncomfortable, but it is part of forming a moral self, and it's part of forming the society around us. We have to be clear about telling the truth, about our sources of the truth. And if we receive information from an untrustworthy source, we need to not spread that false idea. This is difficult in our time, isn't it? Because we live in the age of the internet, when false ideas spread like wildfire. We have a responsibility, therefore, as intelligent people, to be discerning about what we look at, what we think about, what we talk about when it comes to the internet and some of these ideas that spread. And if the king or any other politician, in a time when science indicates, as it may end up doing, it may end up being that we need to wear masks again sometime soon, because enough people have believed the lies that there is some huge problem with these vaccines. But that's allowing the vaccines to mutate. And as they mutate, this new variant has come along. And the thing is, the virus will continue mutating. And it may come to the point where the virus overcomes the vaccine. And then we're all in trouble again, all of us. When science indicates that you should wear a mask, it's a moral issue, not a political one. It's a moral issue, and we need to be truthful in saying that. I don't know about you, but I read the news every day, and the stories this week are heartbreaking of this new Delta variant, and how one story was the death of a 30-year-old son and how his mother was grieving. And another one was a story about the death of a 5-year-old little girl and how her mother grieved. And it was unnecessary if people had gotten the vaccine. The Republican governor of Alabama has told the truth this week. I read it in the Wall Street Journal that Alabama's Republican governor made an urgent plea for people to get vaccinated. She said, quote, "We've got to get folks to take the shot. Folks are supposed to have common sense, but it's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks. It's the unvaccinated folks who are letting us down. Let's get it done," end quote. The impact of lies needs to be countered when people take responsibility and tell the truth. No matter who we are, we have power in our lives. We may not be David, but each and every one of us has power in our lives, and we have a role to live. The role to recognize is that we influence other people, and they're watching us. We have a duty to treat other people with respect, and that respect begins with telling the truth. There was a study I read not long ago about lying. They were studying, and this is just one study. I don't know if this really stands true broadly, but it was a study where they found out as they studied that the average person told about 9 lies a week. It's a little discouraging, isn't it? But they focused with these people and made them self-aware of just how many times they were telling some of these large and small lies. And by focusing on telling the truth, as they continued to study these folks, they got down to 1 lie a week. And the people studied said they felt better. They weren't as depressed. They felt stronger. They had a better sense of well-being. It's integrity. It's integrity that they were feeling. So this next hymn that we're about to sing, we're going to sing it 3 times. It's really a very meditative piece. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. And And what I want you to do as we sing this is think about what would it be like to have a fresh sense of truthfulness that's spread across ourselves, our congregation, our families, and our country. May we learn from David's mistake. May we open ourselves to that Spirit of God, that we might be people of truth. Amen.
Thanks for watching our video. Make sure to subscribe to get the latest and greatest videos from the Old Stone Church. And if you feel blessed by our message, please go to theoldstonechurch.org and click to donate. God bless you today and forever. The Old Stone Church. We've been loving Christ and serving City since 1820.